Hello friends, a very warm welcome to Unsarkari. And the kind of pedagogy and the kind of ideas that we are trying to put through different concepts, they are just to make you understand that even while you are taking a walk, can you recall different ideas? Can you recall environmental vocabulary? So our goal is not to make you mug it up, it's also not to make you fearful, but it is only to make you understand, because once you understand, then you are able to solve all the applied questions smartly. It is with this belief and this understanding that you are going to put your best when you are sitting in front of your screen, because your mind, body and soul is charged to do your best. So let's go for aquatic ecosystems, estuaries and marine communities. Kindly connect with the part 1, because part 1 is about freshwater. So estuarine ecology, when we say, then water of all streams and rivers, they are ultimately draining into the sea. Now, it is the place where fresh water also joins the salt water, and when the fresh water is joining the salt water, it is called an estuary. Estuary, the word comes from estus, tide, the wide lower tidal part of a river which is strongly affected by tidal action. Now, this is what is the definition, one of the definition I should say for your understanding. Wide lower tidal part of a river which is strongly affected by tidal actions. Estuaries are transitional zones. That means they are ecotones. Please do remember, we have discussed this. They are the transitional zones, ecotones between sea and rivers, and are the sites of unique ecological properties possessing a characteristic biological makeup. They are semi-enclosed water bodies of water and have a free connection with the open sea, and within which seawater is measurable, diluted with fresh water from rivers. So that means a kind of a transition, a kind of a combination, a kind of an interaction is going on. So examples of estuaries are river mouths, coastal bays, tidal marshes, water bodies behind barrier beaches. This is itself a prelims question. Not all rivers open into estuaries. Some simply discharge their runoff into the ocean. Estuaries may differ in size, shape, and volume of water flow. All are influenced by the geology of the region. That is why UPSC also asks you certain questions and they will try to bring the geology of that region. If you are not aware, if you cannot visualize, then answer might be wrong. As the river reaches the encroaching sea, the stream's carried sediments are dropped in the quiet water. These sediments are forming delta in the upper reaches of mouth, and they are shortening the estuary. You can think about certain big deltas of the world. Just go and check out the visualize pictures, or you can say short videos. When the silt and mud accumulation become high enough to be exposed at low tide, the tidal flats develop. So was not interested in going to geography or geology, but then for understanding it is very important, which divide and braid the original channel of the estuary. At the same time, ocean currents and tides, they erode the coastline, deposit the material on the seaward side of the estuary, also shortening the mouth. If more material is deposited than carried away, then barrier breaches, islands, and the brackish lagoons also appear. Again, one more very straightforward prelims question. So you have to understand the conditions. That is what just we have discussed. In what conditions, what formations takes place. Going forward, the type of estuaries, they are classified in various ways depending on the diverse criteria such as geomorphology, water circulation and stratification, and system energetics. Please remember this 4 keywords. Thus, on the basis of geomorphology, estuaries include drowned river valleys, estuaries, 4 type estuaries, bar built estuaries, estuaries produced by tectonic processes, and river delta. So these are the 5 types which we have to remember. Based on water circulation and stratification, they can be classified as highly stratified, that is salt wedge estuaries, partially mixed, completely mixed or vertically homogeneous, and they can be hypersaline estuaries. So you have to understand that it is all about salt, it is all about fresh water, and the proportion or the degree of mixture. On the basis of ecosystem energetics, the word that I've just used, they have been classified by Odom like physically stressed systems of wild latitudinal range, natural arctic ecosystems with ice stress, natural temperate ecosystem with seasonal programming, that means they are showcasing the seasonal features, natural tropical ecosystem, coastal ecosystem of high diversity, and emerging new systems associated with men. So just take a deep breath, wait for a moment over here, rewind yourself and try to see these 5 different zones that I've just discussed. The physico-chemical aspects of estuary, if we say the current and salinity, the two words that I've been using since last 4-5 minutes, both are very complex and variable. They shape the life in estuary where the environment is neither freshwater nor salty. And the current, estuarine current, results from the interaction of one direction of stream flow, which varies with the season and rainfall, with oscillating ocean tides and the wind. So the salinity of estuaries varies vertically and horizontally and fluctuates amazingly between 0.5 to 3.5%. Little technical. Due to low salinity, freshwater has lower density than seawater. This is what you have to remember. And there were no tides in an estuary to mix freshwater and seawater. That means the more, I should say, the lighter freshwater would simply flow over the heavier seawater and dissipate in the ocean. So you can say where there are no tides in an estuary to mix fresh water and salt water, the lighter fresh water would simply flow over the heavier water sea and dissipate in the ocean. I'm repeating the same sentence. However, the tidal action acts as a plunger because it is thoroughly flushing the estuary and mixing the fresh and the salt water. This is going to bring several results. The water level in estuary is fluctuating regularly, unlike that of a river. Very true. For this reason, the habitat that is covered at high tide and uncovered at low tide is prominent one in the estuary and has no analog in purely freshwater ecosystem, as we have discussed previously. In other words, variable environment, salinity remains very highest in during summers and drought period, and less water is flowing into estuary at that time. Lowest during the winter and spring when the rivers and streams are discharging their peak loads. No stenohaline organisms such as echinodermata and mollusks could hope to survive in estuaries. So very important from the prelims perspective. And like no other organism could survive, the one cannot tolerate strong winds, turbid water that results from strong current. So that is what we have to understand, that what is the kind of adaptation, what is the kind of ecosystem it is creating. The temperature in estuaries fluctuate considerably, one can say diurnally and seasonally. Water are heated by solar radiation, very true, and inflowing and tidal currents. High tide on mud flats may heat or cool the water depending upon the season. The upper layer of estuarine water may be cooler, like the way we have discussed in the previous times also, in winter, and warmer in summer than the bottom. And a condition that, as in a lake, will result in spring and autumn overturn. This is happening in the lake also, we have discussed. Anyhow, all estuaries have high productivity. That is very true, as estuaries high productivity is exceeded among aquatic communities only by coral reefs. So coral reef are the only exception which have in more, productivity. The reason is that although an estuary may be a harsh environment in some ways, for in some other ways it is not, because the typical estuary is shallow and turbulent. The amount of dissolved oxygen tend to be fairly high. It may be low in the bottom layers of those estuaries where water does not mix to the top and to the bottom. More importantly, the tidal action acts to accumulate, that means concentrate, and nutrient energy material that wash in from upstream in some areas, that enter from the rich nutrient, you can say rich bottom, which is very high in terms of productivity from the sea. So this is a kind of a churning going on, that's what we are saying. Similarly, if I am trying to show through a diagram, then this is sea water, this is substrate, we have discussed already, sea water, nutrient trap, and area of eddy formation, freshwater, river, water surface, and estuary. It depends upon how the cycle is going on. So the biotic communities, if I talk about, then Carricker has classified regions of estuary into head, where the freshwater enters the estuary, upper, middle, lower reaches with increasing range of salinities, and the mouth with salinity nearly equal to the sea. So you just visualize how estuary is from the head to the mouth. Also classified animals inhabiting the estuary regions into oligohaline, this is the key word, mesohaline, polyhaline, and euhaline. It depends where they are. Euhaline is in the mouth of the estuary. So communities of estuaries are a mixture of endemic species and those which come in from sea. And in fact, when the research had been done by Krishnamurthy, he reported that the extent of penetration of polychaetes, Dioptra urabilis, or you can say certain other names, they are very complex, but you are not going to supposed to remember them, in the Adyar estuary in Madras from the Bay of Bengal vary with the salinities at constant temperatures. So this is the only takeaway for us, that the extent of penetration will be varying because there is a varying salinity when the temperature is even same. Furthermore, an estuary being a transitional zone between the fresh water and the seas, as we have seen, it is an ecotone. Therefore, typical estuary forms a unique habitat. So it is a mixture of three components: the marine, the freshwater, and the brackish water. The diversity of both fresh and marine components reach maximum. Total diversity of the estuarine community is lower than that of the either more or normal environments. The number of interactions between species is not high. Some estuarine population may fluctuate greatly in the size. The plant of estuary are of four basic sorts: phytoplankton, marginal and marshy vegetation, mud flat algae, epiphytic plants growing on the marginal marsh vegetation, and because of the turbid water found in estuaries, phytoplanktons are normally uncommon. So this is what is very important from the prelims perspective. This is one fact you have to remember, that what kind of presence of phytoplankton is there in estuaries. In Hooghly Matla Estuarine system in West Bengal, Gopalakrishnan reported abundance of phytoplankton forms. Several species of diatoms and Rhizostoma, Fragillaria, Asteribella, Bidufella, and so on. So these several species of green algae such as Pediostrum and Eudorinia, Clostridium, they are also there, apart from blue-green algae such as Anabina and Trichodesmus, and most species algae are of marine origin. Further, most significant estuarine part are marsh grasses such as Spartina. So the point is that what are the different kind of diversity which we are finding in the estuaries, that is very very important. Very few animals feed on these plants directly, but a very large amount is consumed as detritus. Similarly, Adyar estuary of Madras coast is found rich in invertebrate and vertebrate fauna. I'm just giving an example. The common invertebrate of the estuary are sea anemones, or you can say other examples are also there, Stephensonitis ornata, and the vertebrate fauna of Adyar estuary includes species such as Atroplus maculatus and Atroplus suratensis. These are the names. You can ignore. No need to go through them directly. Just only for your understanding, we are using them. Similarly, when we talk about the subsystems of estuaries, an estuary consists of several basic subsystems linked together by ebb and flow of water that is driven by hydrological cycle and the tidal cycle. Some of its main subcomponents are shallow water production zones. In these zones, the rate of primary production exceeds the rate of community respiration. So prime production is more than the community respiration. The producers are reefs, seaweed, seagrass, beds, algae mats, and salt marshes. The system exports energy and nutrients to deeper water of the estuary and adjacent coastal shelf also. This is rich in diverse type of producers, and these remain programmed for virtually year-round photosynthesis and derive benefit from the tidal action in creating subsidized fluctuating water level ecosystem. So they have all three types of producers such as macrophytes, this is the keyword, seaweed, seagrasses and marsh grasses, benthic macrophytes, and finally phytoplanktons. So benthic algae is growing on macrophytes, sessile animals, rock, sand, and mud. Some estuaries have distinct blooms such as red tides of large blooms of red pigmented dinoflagellates. Similarly, the sedimentary subsystem, you must remember the name of both the subsystems, and that's all, because in sedimentary subsystems, in deeper channels where there are occurring, the sounds and lagoons, they are there, and respiration exceeds production. Now it is the other way around, and in which particulate and dissolved matter from the production zone is used. In these habitats, nutrients are regenerated, recycled, stored, and vitamin and growth regulators are manufactured. So the consumers of these zones are versatile. So you see the kind of activities which are going on these systems, especially in plankton and nekton. They are moving freely between the two above said fixed subsystems, the one we have discussed just now, and they continue producing and converting, transporting nutrients and energy while responding to diurnal, tidal, and seasonal periodicities. One keyword here is holoplanktons. They tend to comprise relatively few species, whereas meroplankton are more. So you have to just, UPSC will go only till the point of understanding of the phytoplankton. The rest all is just for your interest and understanding. Marine ecosystem is including salt water, mass of seas and oceans that cover 70.8% of the Earth's surface and contain 97% of the planet's water. Average depth of ocean is 3,730 meters. These are the facts which you must remember. Oceans strongly influence climate by acting as a reservoir of solar heat, therefore improving the temperature extremes, and as a source of water which falls as precipitation. Hydrological cycle we have discussed in biogeochemical cycles. So Pacific Ocean is the largest, coldest, least saline. Atlantic Ocean is the warmer, more saline, and you can say relatively shallow, and also has a long coastline providing many natural harbors. Smallest and shallowest ocean is Arctic. Antarctic Southern Ocean shows wide variations in temperatures, and Indian Ocean covers, an average depth of 3,872 meters. These are very important facts for prelims. Similarly, the volume of surface area of marine environment lighted by the sun is small in comparison to the total volume of water involved, which is more. This and the dilute solutions of the nutrients limits production. All the seas are interconnected by currents dominated by waves, influenced by tides, and characterized by saline waters. Not only in the seashore and banks, which are the homes of many organisms, but the open ocean, many hundred miles away from the land, supports plant and animal communities of great diversity and complexity. Similarly, when we speak about the physico-chemical aspects of marine environment, the most important physical factors which influence marine life are light, temperature, pressure, salinity, tides, and currents. So you have to remember what is impacting what. So rather than mugging it up, just try to write it down once and try to keep it in your mind, and that's all. It is the fastest way. So light, very significant factor for regulating the pattern of distribution of marine animals, and it's contributed significantly to organic production. We have discussed in details in the previous series. The autotrophic primary producers exploit light energy, photosynthetic production is taking place, and macro consumers of marine ecosystems are there. The amount of light exploited in photosynthesis depends on the intensity and the turbidity of water. For example, 10-meter deep turbid coastal zone receives an equal amount of light energy as 100 meters deep and clear oceanic zone, but the maximum intensity at 10 meters is obviously greater, and the light determines diurnal migrations of marine organisms. It is also regulating color patterns of marine animals. The deep sea fauna, which lives in the total darkness, exhibit either colorlessness or uniform coloration. It is also somehow related to the development of visual sense organs as shown by the absence of functional eyes in the deep sea animals. Very important for the PT again. Similarly, the temperature range in sea is far less than that of land. Very important fact. Arctic water at 27 degrees Fahrenheit are much more colder than the tropical waters, and currents are warmer or colder than the waters through which they flow. Questions are always coming on the ocean currents. Seasonal and daily temperature changes are larger in coastal water than in the open sea. The surface of coastal water is the coolest at dawn and the warmest at dusk. Remember this. In general, seawater is never more than 2 to 3 degrees below the freezing point of fresh water or higher than 81 degrees Fahrenheit or 27.2 degrees centigrade. At any given place, the temperature of deep water is almost constant cold below the freezing point of fresh water. Unlike the freshwater, sea water does not have density maximum at 4 degrees centigrade. Rather, it becomes continuously denser as it gets colder. Very, very important for the prelims examination. Similarly, pressure in the oceans varies from 1 atmosphere at the surface to 1000 atmosphere at great depth. The pressure changes are many times greater in the sea than in the terrestrial environments and have a pronounced effect on the distribution of life. Certain organisms are restricted to surface waters when the pressure is not so great, whereas other organisms are adapted to the life at great depths that we know. Some marine organisms such as the sperm whale and the certain seals can dive to great depths and return to the surface without difficulty, so it is not something which is impossible for them. When we see about the zonation of marine environment, just as lakes exhibit stratification and zonation, so do the seas. The ocean itself is divided into two main divisions: pelagic, the whole body of water, and benthic or the bottom region. The pelagic region is further divided into two provinces: the neritic, near shore water that overlies the continental shelf, and the oceanic provinces is the other one. The continental shelf is the underwater extension of the continent and it generally extends to the depth of nearly 125 to 200 meters. So what we are saying, that when even the ocean is being divided into two divisions, that is pelagic or the whole body of water, and the benthic, that is the bottom region, even the pelagic we discussed, it is further divided into neritic, that is near shore, and the water that overlies the continental shelf, and the oceanic provinces. These are the two ones. The continental shelf is an underwater extension, as I just said. Similarly, the benthic life zones are defined in terms of following physical subdivisions. The littoral or the intertidal zone is the zone between high tide and the low tide levels. The sublittoral extends from low tide mark to the edge of the continental shelf. Just draw it, with the bathyl zone comprising the continental slope. These are the key words. And the abyssal zone includes the abyssal plains, and the hadal zone includes any life in the deep trenches below 5000 meters. The pelagic zone is divided into three vertical layers. From the surface to about 200 meters is photic zone, that is the first one, in which there is a sharp gradient of illumination, temperature, and salinity. The reason below this zone is called aphotic zone, because 200 meters to 1000 meters where very little light is penetrating, and this little light is helping the temperature gradient, which is more even and gradual without much seasonal variation. And there is the mesopelagic zone of apotic zone. It contains an oxygen minimum layer and often maximum concentration of nitrate and phosphate. Below mesopelagic zone is the bathypelagic zone. Bathypelagic zone where the darkness is virtually complete except for the bioluminescence, where the temperature is low and the pressure is great. Now moving forward with the idea that the stratification of marine environment is going to make what kind of differences. The upper layers of ocean water exhibit a stratification of both temperature and salinity. So the depth below 300 meters are usually thermally stable, but in high and low altitudes, the temperature is fairly consistent throughout the year. In middle latitudes, it is varying. Whereas seasons associated with climatic changes, one can say, is one of the factors. In summer, the surface water becomes warmer and lighter, true, forming a temporary seasonal thermocline. This is what you must remember. In subtropical regions, the surface waters are constantly heated, developing a marked permanent thermocline. Between 500 and 1500 meters or 1500 meters, a permanent but relatively slight thermocline exists. So these facts are very important so that you can solve the questions effectively. Let's see salinity. The sea is salty, correct. And then on the top of it, with an average salinity of 35 parts of salt on weight basis per 1000 parts of water, or 3.5%, that is usually written as 35% parts per thousand. In contrast, the salinity of freshwater is about 0.5%. So we have contrasted here the salinity of freshwater, salinity of seawater. The main salts are chloride, sulfates, bicarbonates, carbonates, bromides of sodium, magnesium, calcium, and potassium. Of these salts, sodium chloride is present in maximum amount. The salinity of marine water fluctuates from place to place. The marine life has a specific osmoregulatory adaptation. Remember, we have discussed in detail how osmoregulation functions. And osmoregulatory adaptation for high saline water is there by marine animals. That's what we are saying. The absence of many animal species in marine environment has been related to their ability to, not tolerate, I should say. So inability to tolerate the high salt content of seawater. That is why many uh, animal species will not be found in marine environment, except few insects such as halobates or shore columbolans such as Isotoma spinthurus. Most insects do not occur in marine ecosystem. So this is again a PT fact. I am giving you crucial facts in this lecture. Like other lectures, you have to make sure that you remember them well. Seawater is never static, and waves, currents, and tides are regular features of seawater. All these phenomena are controlled by winds, cosmic forces, and varying water densities. Most worldwide water contents occur at surface and at great depths of seawater, so both the things are there. These currents determine the interchange between the superficial and deep water masses as well as horizontal movements. Both the horizontal and vertical movements of ocean water are significant but for different reasons. So within a given current, such as a warm Gulf Stream, for instance, the water mass retains its identity for great distances, and the warm sea community ranges far north, what have been anticipated, that is the northernmost limits. Similarly, in addition, the climate of terrestrial ecosystem is strongly affected by the nature of adjacent water masses. This has led to such an improvisation of the superficial waters of the ocean that productivity in most parts of the open sea is about the same as that of desert. Again, a prelims fact. So because of the very low concentration of nutrients, especially phosphorus, this is happening. So you see a kind of an interplay is going on when we want to see what kind of life is existing and what kind of ideas are there. At the same time, the lowest waters of the ocean are nutrient rich. There are certain regions in the world, notably at the west coast of the continents, again a PT fact, and in the some polar latitudes in the both hemisphere, where deep currents rise to the surface. These are the zones of upwelling. Very, very important concept. And even though the waters are very cold, they are the sites of intense production because of their relatively high concentration of nutrients. Nutrients are then cycled back to the rest of the ocean via surface currents. Again, a geography concept and tool. So tides. What are tides? Tides are water movements which are caused by some astronomical factors due to pull by moon and sun. They represent a rhythmic rise and fall of water and often waves of long wavelengths. This is what the process is characterizing. So the chief astronomic force behind the tidal rhythm is the attraction of moon and sun, which depends on the movement of earth in relation to the moon and the sun. So I'm not going to do those details. Tides influences the seashore fauna variously. Low tide exposes the shore, high tides floods the substratum. Go to any beach, go to Andamans, and then sit there whole day, or in the morning and evening you will find that you are sitting on the beach in the morning, but by afternoon you will see the water is there, or other way around. Marine communities, when we see the sea biota is not abundant but contain well marked diversity. So every major group of algae, almost every major group of animals can be found somewhere in the ocean. The only striking omissions are vascular plants and insects. Again, a PT fact, which are abundant in estuaries but have few or no marine representatives. Communities of marine environment includes producers, so phytoplanktic diatoms, dinoflagellates, green algae, brown algae, red algae, kelps, consumers such as zooplanktons, benthos, necton, neuston, and bacteria. We have discussed all of them in details. The marine biotic communities can be studied separately for different life zones of the ocean. Now let's talk about biotic communities of oceanic region. Oceanic region, that is what is also known as pelagic region, is less, you can say, is less in species, is less rich in species and numbers than the coastal areas, but it has characteristic species. Okay, it has its own characteristic species, that's what I'm saying. Many of these are transparent or bluish, since the sediment free water of the open sea is marvelously transparent. And interestingly, these animals are nearly invisible. So you'll be questioning, if this is transparent, then why they are and how they are invisible. Animals that are too thick to be transparent frequently have smooth, shiny, and silvery bodies, which make them invisible by mirroring the water in which they swim. Further, the animals of pelagic zone of ocean encounter stable and uniform environmental conditions due to the continuity of water of the seas. So, this continuity of the seawater causes the individuals of the open sea to stay away temporarily or permanently from any solid objects, and they are provided with different locomotor organs, very very important for understanding in the prelims exam. However, the plankton forms lack locomotor organs and they float freely. We have already discussed these questions in our personal interactions. So here is graphic representation. Whip-like tail, you see, luminescent organs, frail and weak body, body thin and flabby, luminescent fin rails. So not the names, you have to understand the characteristics. Radiolarian, comb jelly, then copod or crustacean, arrow worm, and so on. So just try to understand and try to see that what kind of understanding you can have of different kind of animals. Coral reef is a specialized oceanic ecosystem. Why? Because they are among the most productive of all ecosystems. We have already mentioned it once. With the diversity equaled only by tropical rainforests. That means tropical rainforest on one hand and the corals on the other hand, they are amazingly productive. Reef environment is very rugged one because it is constantly subjected to the pounding of the waves. And parts of the reef are open above water at low tide. But the reef is also very rich environment for those species that can withstand the physical pounding of water. Amount of oxygen is very high. During the day, it may reach 250% of saturation because the production of oxygen by algae in the reef structure is one of the reasons. Likewise, the tremendous amount of carbon dioxide produced by metabolism can be carried off before it becomes too high. So, the reefs can be found wherever a suitable substrate exists in the lighted water of the tropics, away from the areas of continental sediments, which would tend to bury the reef in mud or cold upwellings, which would tend to lower the temperature too much. Therefore, they may form a barrier reef. For example, barrier reef in Australia, which contain canals or lagoons between them and coast. That is why it is called barrier reef. Adjacent to the continents, atolls or ring-shaped or horseshoe-shaped islands on the top of marine heights, or fringing reefs as in Mandapam, Upper Islands and Hare Islands. In all modern reefs, the main reef structure is formed by madreporian corals of the following families. So there, I am giving the name of the families. You don't need to remember it as such, but just be aware: Poritidae, Acroporitidae, Astridae, and Milliporidae. Secretions of calcareous algae go into the building of the reefs is a prelims fact. Coral reefs normally exist in water with mean temperature of 20.5 degrees centigrade, but they can withstand very high temperatures. The growth of the coral reef is influenced by salinity and reduced tides. Moderate water movement around the coral reefs help in the circulation of food. So we have discussed in a very quick lightning manner what is happening in saline, or you can say sea, or you can say salty, or you can say estuary. All different kind of ideas that we have discussed are very very important. They are complementary to the freshwater lecture that we did before this. Make your own notes, go for common sense ideas, squeeze it, consolidate it, revise it, go for certain facts, and you will be able to nail all the questions in the prelims examinations, which have been asked, which will be asked, and which forms the basis for success in not only just CSE but in other exams also. See you in the next lecture. Thank you very much.